Daniel Linder, marriage family therapist, addiction specialist, and relationship trainer, practicing in the San Francisco Bay Area for over 30 years. I am also the creator of the relationship model of addiction. I'm doing these videos that are targeted primarily for the recovering population, and my vision is to really help you and support you on your journey, on your recovery journey. I talked about a couple of basic concepts and principles so far, and I just want to allude to them quickly to just make sure we're aligned here and we're kind of up to date. The biggest challenge in recovery is transitioning out of unhealthy relationships that support addiction and into healthy relationships that support recovery and nourish self-growth. Now, what we also talked about was what this involves is a paradigm shift. I want to help you make this paradigm shift from an outer-centered or other-centered way of relating or being in relationships to becoming more self-centered in the way you relate and conduct yourself in relationships. This is a very big deal. You know, we talked about codependency, and most recovering people in struggling, in relationships have codependent tendencies. And that is, they tend to get lost in the relationship and defer to the other person, or put more attention and energy on what the other person is feeling and wanting to kind of please them and accommodate them, and in the process lose themselves. So their priority, they put their feelings, wants and needs of the other person above their own. And in the process of recovery from codependency, we talked about it's a process of reprioritization, where you learn to put your feelings, needs and wants as the top priority, thus moving from other-centered to self-centered. Now, I thought it could be useful to exemplify these concepts and these principles visually and in number format, just to give you another way of kind of getting the program or getting the gist of what we're doing here. So I drew out some pictures here. I want to introduce a new principle also at this time. Something else for you to kind of wrap your head around, learn, and practice in your life mindfully. And that is what I call the 51-49% factor. This is the secret. This is the key to an optimal relationship, where there's the optimal balance, the optimal level of intimacy and balance between self and other. So what the 51-49% factor means is this: that in every relationship, there are two relationships. Every relationship you're in, there are two relationships. One with the other person and one with yourself. We talked about a lot of times the most important relationship is with yourself. Well, this is what the 51-49% factor is about. It's about whenever you're relating and whenever you're in a relationship with someone, you want your attention and your energy and on your own experience primarily. That means at least where you're coming from is going to be 51%, at least 51% from what your experience is, and you are directing your attention and your energy on the other person, the remaining 49%. And the other person is doing the same thing. They're also operating in their own interests and staying on the 51% side, coming from the relationship with themselves, and ideally directing the remaining 49% of their time, attention, energy, love, investment on you. So 51-49. So this is kind of what it looks like here. In a codependent relationship, or those in early recovery where you tend to rely, you're externally located and relying on external sources or the other person for your own well-being, this is what that looks like. You have these half circles here, and they're not quite exactly where I want them to be, but for this purpose it should suffice. Codependent relationships go like this. The self is a little bitty little thing here. This is the self, and the other person is like a mountain compared to the self. The self, in terms of presence and groundedness, pales in comparison. You're a little old bitty little thing little piece of you have a little mound of ground that you're standing on, and you're up against this big mountain, and this is how you get lost in it, lost in a relationship, because the way you relate the other person and what's going on, the other person's experience and how you perceive the other person is so commanding, it's so big, you're small, the other person's too big. So now we're moving to the paradigm shift. The paradigm shift is about you expanding your presence and groundedness to this. So you're blowing up, you're expanding, and for this picture, you're moving towards becoming 80% present, while the other's presence is shrinking, while your reliance on the other person and your attention and energy on the other person is shrinking. Now, this is where you're moving towards. This isn't where you want to end up. But I want you to get that what you want to do, if you're coming from over here, you want to make yourself much, 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 much bigger, and the other person, you're considering the other person much, much, much less. Now, if you're doing that mindfully, you want to end up, and you can end up over here, which is now back to the 51-49%. This is self-other. It looks almost equal, where you're as attentive and invested and involved with the other person as you are with yourself, except there's a little tail here on this circle, and that is the 50. This is the 1%. This is the 1% over the 50 that you are always going to be coming from your own experience, your interests, and what you're feeling, wanting, and needing. That's what you're going to be coming from. So you could represent that, and if there's a conflict, you want to be able to stay in your world, in yourself. So, and then if you're able to do that, the remaining 49%, all the other energy, you can direct to the other person and shower the other person with and invest in the other person. The other person is doing the same thing. They're directing 49% of their energy onto you and consideration of you and invested and engaged with you, while staying grounded in themselves, in their own world, and in their own self, 51%. It's established in a relationship. That this is another important point when you're relating or in a relationship. It's important, it's really necessary. If you're going to get to this optimal balance of intimacy, it's going to be necessary that you have this conversation. And the conversation is going to go like this. We're going to meet, okay, let me see if I can get this clearer for you. This is another picture, by the way, that I put together here, just again, for conceptual purposes. This is a relationship, okay? And approximately, what this means is that approximately 1/3 of the time you're going to be in your own world, 1/3 of the time the other person's going to be in their own world, and approximately 1/3 you're going to meet in what I call the sacred space of co-creation. And in this space here, in terms of how we're going to conduct ourselves, establishing the terms of the relationship, you want to make it explicit, and you want to have agreement and alignment and a mutual understanding that when you relate to each other, you're going to be coming from what your truth is, what your feelings are, what your true experience is. You're going to be honoring that, and the other person's going to be doing the same, and you're going to be supporting each other to do that. rather than say what the other person wants to hear, or that kind of thing. You know, accommodate the other person at your own expense. So you want to establish that understanding that you're not going to do that. You're going to be meeting each other, being whole, full, grounded, and true to yourselves. So let's see. So these are the pictures here, and these are the numbers. This is just the beginning. I'm going to be talking more about this 51-49% because it's so basic and so key. Any comments and questions you have down below, I'll respond to keep the relationship going between you and I. And until then, I'll see you on the other side. The quality of your relationships is the quality of your life.